Welcome back, fellow mages, to the Grounded Mage, where we explore how myth and magic exist in everyday life. Today, we're talking about one of the most unpredictable forces in myth, the Trickster. And we're doing it through one of the boldest of them all, Loki, the shapeshifting chaos agent of Norse mythology. But we're not going to stop there because Loki isn't alone. All over the world, there are tricksters. We're going to cover Coyote, who brings both fire and trouble to humanity, and Anansi, the West African spider who spins webs of wisdom through deception. Different cultures, different masks, same archetype. The cosmic rule breaker who exposes truth through mischief. And here's the twist. Tricksters don't just live in myth. They live in you. So let's unpack why chaos, humor, and a little rule breaking might just be the secret ingredients to transformation. So let's get into it. Carl Jung. Yes, this podcast loves to talk about Jung. Described the trickster as a collective shadow, a figure that embodies our repressed impulses, our hidden desires, and our love of disorder. The trickster says what no one else will. He breaks the rules that have gotten too rigid, and he reveals the hypocrisy of order that's lost its humanity. And here's the fascinating thing. Every single culture has one. When you start to see that, you realize the trickster isn't just cultural. He's psychological. He's humanity's mirror, laughing back at us when we take ourselves too seriously. All right, let's start with Loki because his reputation precedes him. Shapeshifter, schemer, father of monsters. He has helped the gods, betrayed the gods, and made them laugh. Sometimes all within the same story. He is the reason Thor has Mjolnir, but he's also the reason so many disasters happen in Asgard. Loki is a contradiction personified. He's the system glitch that reveals where the code is flawed. Did you know that even though he was despised amongst the gods, he was still their first choice when something needed to be done? Thor, especially, often called upon Loki when he needed help. This is because he possessed unique skills and had strategic thinking and unmatched cunning. This allowed Loki to outsmart others and get things done because he had approaches that were less straightforward and more subtle. Thor is always able to burst through a door or a gate and use brute force to solve any problem. But Loki, he had the ability to shapeshift into beings that could confuse or intrigue the target, making him more effective in some cases. For example, when the giant Thrym stole Mjolnir, Thor called upon Loki to help get it back. Loki travels to the giant, asks for the hammer back, but Thrym refuses, saying he will only give it up in exchange for the goddess Freya as his bride. So, Loki returns to Thor with this information, and then helps Thor shapeshift into Freya to meet the ransom commands. Loki travels with him, disguised as a handmaiden. While they're at the wedding feast, the giant is suspicious of his bride's enormous appetite, but Loki covers for him, saying Freya was so hungry from the long journey, so she ate a whole ox, a salmon, and drunk 3 measures of mead. Loki then tells Thrym to bring out the hammer to bless the bride, and once Thor has it, he reveals his true identity, unleashes his power, and defeats the giants. In the mythic sense, Loki is essential, because without chaos, even the gods would stagnate. And in a lot of cases, things would never get done. Every story needs tension. Every psyche needs disruption. That's where Loki comes in. He tears down the old so something new can emerge. Now, let's travel west, across the ocean of myth, to the stories of the indigenous peoples of North America, where Coyote roams. Coyote is the ultimate fool and the ultimate teacher. He steals fire for humans, outsmarts stronger animals, and constantly gets himself into trouble. He is greedy, proud, curious, hilarious, and somehow always survives his own disasters. He shows us that wisdom doesn't always wear a robe, sometimes it wears a smirk. And what makes him fascinating is that his foolishness is his teaching. And one of my favorite stories, summarized as best I can, is the one where he steals fire to give to humanity, much like Prometheus did, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago. The story essentially goes like this. Fire is jealously guarded by the fire beings, or the fire keeper, or the frog people. Really depends which version of the myth you read. Regardless, they live on a distant mountain. Coyote, with the help of other animals, antelope, fox, wolf, beaver, etc., devise a relay plan. He and the other animals attend a dance held by the fire beings. Coyote, using a headdress made of flammable pine shavings, dances closer and closer to the fire until the headdress catches alight. He then runs away, passing the fire from one animal to the next as the fire beings pursued them. The chase caused chaos, and some of the animals were caught or injured, but they successfully scattered sparks across the land, hiding fire in trees and rocks for humans to discover. This act of deception was a gift to humanity, providing warmth and light and fundamentally changing their way of life. It's a short story, but it's a great example of how deceiving Coyote can be. Now, he does also make mistakes. There is a tale where he tries to create a magic salmon trap, and the trap keeps filling up before he's ever able to build a fire to cook what he's already taken from it. This causes the method of salmon catching to switch to spearing. Coyote reminds us that growth comes not from perfection, but from play. Coyote's chaos is creative. It cracks open the world so something new can enter. And doesn't that sound familiar? That time you thought your failure ruined everything, but it actually redirected your life? That's Coyote's energy. Now, let's move back the other way to West Africa, where Anansi the spider weaves stories that outsmart the powerful. Anansi doesn't have strength or weapons, but he's got wit. He tricks bigger gods, kings, and even death itself. Anansi even tricked his way into bringing stories to mankind to help their lives be more entertaining. The story goes like this. Long ago, all the stories in the world belonged to Niame, the sky god, who kept them locked away in a golden box high in the sky. The people on Earth had no stories and lived in dullness. Anansi, the clever but mischievous spider, was determined to acquire these stories and bring them to the world. Anansi climbed his web up to Naime's dwelling in the clouds and asked to buy the stories. Naime, amused by the little spider's audacity, agreed to a price he believed was impossible for anyone to pay. The price was to capture 4 of the most dangerous and elusive creatures in the world: the python, the hornets, the leopard, and the fairy. Anansi accepted the challenge and returned to Earth to use his cunning rather than strength to capture the creatures. 1. Capturing the python. Anansi went to the forest with a long stick and some strong vines and argued with the python about whether or not he was longer than the stick. To prove he was longer than the stick, the python stretched himself out alongside the stick, allowing Anansi to quickly and easily tie him up in the vines. 2. Capturing the hornets. Anansi filled a gourd with water and traveled to where the hornets lived. He poured some water on the ground and on the nest, convincing the hornets that it was raining. He then offered the inside of his dry gourd as a safe shelter, and once they all flew in, Anansi sealed the lid. 3. Capturing the leopard. Anansi dug a deep pit in the forest where the leopard roamed and covered it with branches and leaves. The leopard fell into the trap, and Anansi, pretending to help, convinced the leopard to let him tie him up to a tree so he could be pulled out safely. And once the leopard was secured, Anansi carried him away. 4. Capturing the fairy. Anansi carved a doll and covered it in sticky sap. He placed the doll in a forest with some food nearby. When the invisible fairy saw the food, she asked the doll for some. And because the doll didn't answer, she struck it in anger, getting her hands and eventually her whole body stuck in the sap. Having captured all 4 creatures, Anansi returned to the sky god. Naime, though reluctant to part with his treasured stories, kept his word. He called an assembly of all the gods and declared that from then on, all stories would belong to Anansi and would be known as the Spider Stories. Anansi took the golden box of stories back down to Earth and shared them with all the people, filling the world with tales, fables, and wisdom that continue to be told to this day. From this story, we learn this. Anansi's trickery isn't cruel. It's survival. It's intelligence in the face of injustice. For enslaved peoples in the Americas, Anansi became a symbol of resilience, the one who keeps his spirit alive through humor and cleverness when power is stacked against them. So Anansi's chaos isn't random. It's liberation. It's rebellion through creativity. He reminds us that the trickster's laughter can be both joy and defiance. Sometimes, humor is the only weapon you have left, and that is still magic. Let's connect the dots. Loki, Coyote, and Anansi may look different, but they share one sacred purpose. They break patterns to reveal the truth. Psychologically, that's what transformation is. Every time your life falls apart, your mind says something is wrong, but your soul says, no, something is just changing. That's trickster medicine. It's the creative energy of chaos, the collapse that clears the way. And there's even research to back this up. A 2016 study found that people exposed to moderate unpredictability, just enough chaos, become more creative, flexible, and open to new perspectives. How, you might ask? Well, a few different ways. 1, being exposed to moderate unpredictability builds your tolerance for the unknown. The more you're exposed to it, the more your fear of the unknown reduces and prevents you becoming rigid when larger and more significant challenges arise. 2, it encourages cognitive flexibility. Moderate unpredictability prompts your brain to switch between different ways of thinking and incorporate new information. When an outcome isn't guaranteed, you're forced to look for alternatives and adjust your approach, rather than relying on a single established method. 3, it promotes problem-solving skills. Dealing with unexpected situations requires active problem solving. You learn to assess the current context, draw on diverse tools or coping mechanisms, and fine-tune your response based on feedback, which sharpens your ability to navigate future complexities. 4, it helps you develop emotional regulation. Adapting to unpredictable events isn't just cognitive, it's also emotional. Managing your emotional responses to minor disruptions, minimizing disappointment, cultivating curiosity, is a key part of emotional stability, which in turn supports overall flexibility. 5, it prevents rigidity. A predictable environment can lead to mental and behavioral rigidity, where you become accustomed to a certain way of doing things. Unpredictability breaks these patterns, encouraging a willingness to bend and break habits and challenge yourself when circumstances change. And lastly, it enhances neural plasticity. Regular engagement with varied situations and movement encourages the growth of neural connections, supporting cognitive flexibility and keeping your mind agile as you age. In essence, moderate unpredictability acts as a form of mental and behavioral training, preparing you to thrive amidst disruption and uncertainty rather than being hindered by it. It's like the psyche needs mischief to evolve. Order gives stability, chaos gives growth. Without both, you get stuck. Think about a time when life threw you a curveball, something that upended your plans, forced you to pivot, or humbled your ego. At first, it felt awful, right? But now think, what did it teach you? Who did it make you become? That's your trickster story. And like all good myths, it probably started with laughter and ended with wisdom. Now, tricksters don't just stir chaos, they hold up mirrors. Loki mocks the gods' arrogance, Coyote reveals the cost of foolish pride, and Anansi exposes the injustice of power and celebrates the cleverness of survival. They all remind us that we are constantly pretending, playing roles, wearing masks, clinging to the illusion of control. And what's the trickster's job? To rip that mask off. So, when something in your life goes wrong, or someone calls you out, or the universe hands you an unexpected plot twist, maybe it's not punishment. Maybe it's a trickster moment. Maybe it's your own soul laughing softly, saying, "Hey, you got too serious. Let's shake things up." So, how do we partner with our inner trickster instead of fearing it? Well, first, you have to start by laughing at yourself. If you take every moment of your life seriously, you're never going to learn new ways of doing things or thinking about things. If you let the things that go wrong deeply upset you every time, you'll never move forward. You have to find the humor in the things that don't go as planned and use them as lessons for your evolution. Next, you have to let your curiosity replace your control. Curiosity shifts our focus from fear to wonder. It invites us to explore and embrace the unknown instead of resisting it. When you're curious, you listen without judgment and you become more empathetic. And lastly, you do this by realizing that failure and mischief are just the soul's way of evolving. Remember, failing is realizing that this way of doing things simply doesn't work. Run with that. Change the way you have done things so you can discover the things that do work. Using a little bit of mischief to find new ways of doing things is only going to make the process more entertaining. So don't be afraid to slightly bend the rules. Within reason, of course. I am not encouraging anyone to break any laws, but definitely challenge the status quo a little bit here and there. Think of the tricksters we've covered today. Loki teaches us that nothing is sacred, and that lesson itself is sacred. Coyote teaches us to learn through play, and Anansi teaches us to use wit when the world feels unfair. Together, they remind us transformation isn't tidy. It's clever, it's clumsy, it's a cosmic slapstick comedy with purpose. Because the trickster isn't trying to break you, he's trying to break your illusions. Where could you bring in more play into your process of becoming? Where could you stop forcing order and start dancing with the mess instead? Because sometimes chaos isn't the end of the story. It's just the punchline before the next chapter. Here's the real secret. The trickster doesn't just disrupt, he renews. In Norse myth, Loki's chaos ultimately brings about Ragnarok, the end of the world. But in that ending lies the beginning of a new world. Coyote keeps dying and being reborn in his stories because transformation never really stops. Anansi passes his stories to humanity because wisdom only matters when it's shared. Destruction, death, and rebirth. It's all trickster energy. Because to truly change, something in you has to be willing to fall apart first. That's not failure. That's evolution. So, the next time your plans unravel or life plays a trick on you or you feel like the universe is laughing, maybe it is. But remember, it's laughing with you, not at you. Because mischief and transformation are often the same spell in different tones. So, fellow mage, let the trickster teach you. Let chaos become creativity. Let endings become beginnings. And above all, keep your humor handy. It's the oldest magic there is. Until next week, make it make magic.